This is another video in the series of the €1 houses in Sicily, in Italy, and essentially in this video I'm actually going into further detail on what went right, what didn't go right for me as a process of looking for a house in Italy. So this is basically a continuation of the previous video where I did a brief introduction into the whole topic, and today we're talking about what were the alternatives, because essentially €1 houses or or even €2 or €3 houses in Sicily or in Italy, elsewhere in Italy, do make headlines, and there is a lot of coverage on YouTube. It is a popular topic, relatively speaking. But for me, as I believe for many other buyers, the issue was also, okay, what are the alternatives? And I did a lot of research in major cities and smaller cities, and what were the considerations for essentially going for maybe a flat in maybe Palermo, maybe Catania, maybe in a smaller cities, or maybe for a house in a better condition in a smaller village, because essentially a village would be about 5,000 residents, more or less, and the cities would be around 40, let's say 40,000 and upwards if it is larger cities, or slightly lower if it is a smaller city. For comparison, I was looking also into real estate in southern, or let's say northern Spain, and also across Spain as well, and so you could find really good objects, really good quality flats in southern Catalonia, which is basically in the north of Spain, and that would be in a city, or it's a small town with around 15,000 residents, so that it will have full infrastructure, it will have a connection to the railway network, it would have well proximity to the sea, etc. And so if we come back to Sicily, that were also among the questions I was asking myself. Does that small town have a connection to railway? Does that small town have a good, let's say, connection via bus, maybe to Palermo, maybe to the airport, etc., etc. So that once you come to the stage where you actually consider buying a property in Sicily, then you start thinking about, okay, does that city have let's say decent grocery stores, gyms, healthcare, dental care? In other words, other options which I can find actually on Google Maps, searching for that. Are these options are actually let's operate? In other words, if you move there, will you have to actually go each time to a larger city to get the basic things done, or you will have basic services in the same area? And I think that would be something to consider also if you would want to buy something in a really small place, because there are those villages or small towns, as they also call it in Sicily, that also are being marketed, etc. But those would have 5,000 or less residents, and then you will have to think about the age structure. Italy in general is an aged society, and Sicily would have a lot of the young people go elsewhere for employment opportunities, education, and then you would have maybe only after they finish their education, or after the experience the real estate prices, let's say in Milano, in Rome, elsewhere in Italy, or maybe even if, let's say elsewhere in Europe, let's say in London, in Frankfurt, in Berlin, etc. In other words, if you think about how much it costs to rent a medium to large flat elsewhere in Europe, then Sicily can be attractive in that aspect, so that it can be a big money saver, even if you factor in all of the costs upkeep, the taxes, etc. So that I will be going into that slightly in each video, but basically yeah, right now, if you think about, let's say, either €1 house in one of those places in Sicily, or also maybe in southern Italy in general, and there would be some smaller towns or villages across Italy offering similar houses for purchase at a symbolic price. But then you would want to think, okay, after you purchase it, how long will it take, the whole thing? And I think this is what we could be underestimating. Let's say if you come from Northern Europe or in the world, that it is a slow moving society. Let's say my search for property in Sicily took about more than a year, up to 2 years, and only because I was just switching areas, switching ideas about what I was looking for. And on the one hand, it was very good and convenient, since I could actually think about maybe, let's say, Palermo, maybe in Catania, let's say, if you speak about larger cities. And then I started thinking about, okay, in terms of let's say, how affordable a property is. Maybe smaller cities are also an idea to explore. And then I went for €1 house as probably one of the most cost-effective options. But then again, you will have to think about, after you purchase, after you do the renovation, after you do let's say a minimal investment into the property, and it could be tens of thousands of euros at least. And then what if you wouldn't want to live there for whatever reason, and you think about, let's say, Airbnb, how much of a demand can you get for a property in a smaller town somewhere in Sicily, as opposed to let's say, medium city, let's say, or a smaller town in Sicily, given the presence of tourism, given, let's say, the opportunities. Let's say, if you think about somebody coming to Sicily for, let's say, a few days, a few weeks, or even a month or two, then he or she, or let's say, or entire family would want to have an entire flat, preferably in a historical city, preferably not too far from the sea, etc. Would actually something to see in the downtown. And then again, I lived in Spain, and then in a smaller town, and then you have to realize that the income levels in Southern Europe are relatively depressed. And then if it is a smaller city, then there could be issues with crime, immigration, etc., etc. And usually historical centers are more or less kept up, are more or less policed, are more or less secure. But if you go elsewhere, suburbs in the same town could be not really safe, and this is something that you will be learning only after you, let's say, move in, after you really follow local news. And I think this will be the case also for Italy, southern Italy in general, and Sicily in particular, since it is one of the least well-off on average areas of Italy. So that it means that, okay, if you buy something in a smaller town or even a village, then the question will be, after tourists do their research on the area, on the let's say, how nice could it be to spend let's say, any time there, then you might have issues with actually recouping your investment unless you move there. So this is why I kind of thought, okay, I need to consider options, maybe a flat, maybe even something really small in a larger city. But then again, if you go for really smaller properties, say in the larger cities, like let's say in Palermo, maybe suburbs of Palermo, then there could be issues of crime, etc. That if it is, let's say, an area which is not safe, or if it is an area which is known to have mafia presence, again, violence issues, let's say, poverty, etc., etc. So that you should think about how nice the area can be in principle if you buy property there, or if you can think about maybe doing Airbnb rentals, etc., etc. So that if you think about all of those points, then the issue becomes less easy to decide upon. And I think the same thing would be if you think about Catania, which is actually known for gang violence, a lot of mafia issues, etc., etc. And I think mafia is a big deal in southern Italy in general. Sicily is known for that, and I think people who buy €1 properties actually talk about mafia presence as well. So that once again, there are I would say various issues to consider, like maybe a trade-off. So that if you get after an auction, after all of the hoops being actually jumped through a property for a symbolic price, which you will have to invest in to restore, given the interest of the local municipal governments of the state itself, to encourage people to move into southern Italy, areas which have let's say more of the presence of those who are underprivileged or disadvantaged in one way or another. Then you kind of would have to also accept that there will be challenges or issues to be mindful of while you're doing renovations, after you move in, as you live there, etc. And I don't really think that that could be a deal breaker in and of itself, but that could be something to be really aware of. And for instance, if you watch series from Italy, and I think this could be one of the better ways to learn about the country, about the culture, etc., etc. So that then you kind of get a sense that okay, some areas in Italy are really chaotically governed, and then once again, and then it could be a good idea to move to there to live some time, especially given that Airbnbs there are not really expensive, and you could be having a very good rental price in small towns in Sicily, so that it could be a good opportunity to actually see up close what it is like to live in one of those areas, to kind of hear from other experts the experience of that, so that and that will essentially comes back to the issues of options, and this is why I kind of thought about also flats in smaller towns like let's say Sciacca, Noto, maybe in the area of Palermo, because if you think about the railway connections, then maybe any city within let's say an hour's ride by train, it could be a good option to explore. So, or even let's say smaller cities in the center of Sicily. And then also what I would say was really surprised by is that in the southern Sicily, in the eastern part of Sicily, there is a big presence of the chemical industries, oil-related, gas-related industries, and that means that there are issues of high cancer rates in some areas. There are issues about air quality, pollution, etc., etc., and this is mostly relating to the eastern and southeastern parts of Sicily. So those areas are not exactly something I would actually recommend, especially especially on the coast, since it is where those industrial oil processing, gas processing installations are actually situated. So that it means that after you like really go through the map of Sicily, after you like really take into account flooding, let's say droughts, water issues, water costs, internet, let's say high-speed internet, flooding risk, and also the records. In other words, even let's say in recent years, there were increasing floodings of some areas of Sicily. So there are all say extreme winds or extreme weather events or this and that. So that once you go into the headlines, then it could be a good, I shall put it, input into what you should be thinking of, especially if you think about, let's say, a larger area, let's say a smaller town with about 40 to 20,000 residents, because those would have, let's say, more services and more aid, maybe also arriving faster if needed after, let's say, a small flooding, after a small weather event. And then also if you think about a flat, that then if you look at the build quality, the year a house is built, the structure of the house, because let's say I have a good friend who's bought a well-priced flat in Barcelona, and one wouldn't think about a lot of issues there, but still he actually happened to buy a house, say a flat in a house which had structural issues, which he only learned about after he bought it. So which means that actually hiring somebody who is a specialist in the local market and who can actually spend time on learning about those issues that could actually be saving you a lot of money and trouble over time. So that while on the one hand searching for a property in Sicily can be a long and socially fraught process. In other words, you are entrusting your future into the hands of somebody you don't know, and he has his own sense of time, sense of whatever, and then and things actually will be taking place both for you as you think about options, maybe this area or that area or this idea or that idea, let's say a flat as opposed to a small house. Since let's say even bigger or smaller cities in Sicily would have various options: a villa, a house, a flat, etc. So that it means that you can actually be going through a lot of different options, and then again, also there are all those online platforms like the website Immobiliari, like the website Idealista, which is actually one of the main platforms for renting, buying, etc. But then again, once you start to actually know the market, after you go through a lot of announcements, my impression was that the quality of the properties doesn't really rise with the price, so that even if you go to the higher and higher price brackets, the quality of you see actually stays more or less the same as it rises. It's like something like really low, like say either it is either like really new expensive flat, or if somebody has already renovated a flat for you or before you buy, which could be also an option, because essentially you never know how much it will cost you today to do a same quality renovation after you buy something which will be less expensive to purchase in the first place. So that which means that without the input of an expert, which can actually tell why this or that property costs more or less, and it could be about a quality of the let's say structure, house itself, if there's a flat, or it could be about the air, or it could be about issues that you don't necessarily know about before you buy or move into the area. It's, well, especially if you didn't visit the place or see it up close. And I think that those who would actually be going to Italy and doing it in person maybe will be, I would say, hearing more of the backstory with, say, their agent or several agents, or say through the communication with people who are actually on the ground, such as let's say forums of experts, such as maybe people who've already done similar process. And I think that this video can help you, let's say, to have a sense of the risks and also of the opportunities of what you can find. And once again, affordability could go a long way in spite of all the issues combined. And then again, you should be thinking if this is right for you, if this is going to be a right price for you, given your budget for the purchase, for the renovations, your plans in terms of either living there or renting out as an Airbnb property, or maybe via an agent, so that one should be thinking of it as a business person, so that this could be working well for you, both at the stage of actually finding what's right, which could be very difficult to arrive. I don't expect you to actually figure out it immediately or even in a year or two. And then that could be an issue of what is the right property for you, let's say finding the right fit and then actually closing the deal, finalizing the whole thing, and then also, let's say, thinking about what's next for you in terms of, let's say, the registration, etc. And I think that I can cover that in my other videos in this series. Thank you very much.